So would you argue that Jacob and Esau are primarily types in Romans 9? Types of peoples?
You mean like archetypes?
Yeah. That they're primarily, that Paul's focus there is primarily to talk about the group that they represent.
So I would use the term metonymy.
So
when we say like the crown, we're referring to, or the White House, we might be referring to the executive branch.
Yeah. What is the function of Paul mentioning the specific marital act then through which Isaac or through which Jacob and Esau were conceived?
Yeah, I think what he's doing here is he's helping the audience realize something that he previously addressed, that not all are of Israel, and he's helping them digest that there are a group of Israelites. Also, it's interesting that he calls them Israel, not Jews, when you think about it, because during the Second Temple Judaism, they were referred to as Jews. So he calls them Israelites. But what he's doing here is he's showing that this cut-off group, they are like Ishmael now, and they are like Esau now, and they are like Pharaoh now, because they have been cut off from the promise. Their hearts have been hardened.
But why does he mention that? Because all of that could be true, and yet mentioning the specific marital act wouldn't be necessary to make that point.
How do you mean? I mean, it does demonstrate the point, because he's showing that even though these are people who are by blood, who are children of the flesh, they're not, right? They're not children of the promise.
But that specific marital act isn't true of the corporate people, right? It's only true of Jacob and Esau. So it would seem then that the focus has to be particularly them. Why wouldn't that?
Well, even if it's particularly them, they are the figureheads, the sources of these groups.
Sure. Yeah, so...
I mean, that's why the metonymy exists, because...
But in terms of... So a metonymy is referencing something else by way of something proximate, right?
Right.
But it seems like Paul's specific focus, what I'm getting at is, it seems like it's specifically on them in that passage. So not as a metonymy. It's true that the group emanates from them, but if it were just a metonymy, where one refers to something proximate to refer to something else, then mentioning the specific marital act would not make sense, it seems to me.
Maybe I'm just not seeing the point there.
Yeah. Well, because it doesn't pertain to groups. Like Israel as
it pertains to the creation of the group.
But the group itself, so Israel as a whole, considered, let's say, as a non-specified group, right? Their constitution through a specific marital act just doesn't apply to that group. It doesn't apply to everyone in that group.
I'm having trouble tracking, but I'll keep giving it more thought.
So when St. Paul talks about before they were born or had done anything either good or bad, would you say the reference of the they is primarily the reference of the metonymy?
Paul is giving grounding to the metonymy. So here that is talking about the individuals. Before he's referring to Jacob and Esau.
Okay.
As individuals.
So is your argument then that he switches before they were either born, if that's primarily about the individuals, then he switches from talking primarily about the individuals before they were either born or had done anything.
So the switch is Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. That is, I think, certainly the metonymy.
Okay, so if it's just specifically that verse, what do you find problematic about looking at Malachi 1 and saying, well, no, that's still, Paul can legitimately apply Malachi 1 because God's relation to the group, the peoples that emanate from them, is determined and specified by his relation to that individual, Jacob, and the individual Esau.
Yeah, say that again. And
so what would be
how is that an objection against?
So and that's fair. So it seems that and correct me if I'm wrong, that your argument that Jacob I loved, Esau I hated is primarily metonymy for the people comes from the fact that in Malachi 1, those words refer to groups. Is that correct? Is that a fair statement of the argument? So if in Malachi 1, however, God can say Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated because he made a promise with that individual, which then determines the nature of that group. It would be completely fitting to use Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated to talk about the individuals. And so what would be the relation then of that for clause? Because Paul precedes that quote with the word for. So he seems to be using Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated as a...
I mean, I'm not denying that Jacob is the child of the promise and Esau is not.
Okay.
I mean, right, the Genesis narrative is clear there. But what does that mean for their eternal destinies? The text doesn't tell us. The text in Genesis doesn't tell us, and the text in Romans 9 doesn't tell us.
So would you agree then that Jacob as the individual, is designated as a child of the promise, irrespective of foreseen faith or works?
I think he's a children of the promise insofar as he's part of the group that Yahweh is at that early stage building and creating.
But it seemed like you agreed that earlier the word "they" referred to the promise coming to the individual.
Yeah, let me give a fuller example here, or some other examples. So we can think that there were in Israel, and this is Paul's whole point, that there are children in that birth line
Mm-hmm.
that are not children of the promise.
Mm-hmm.
And so with Jacob, again, we have this early nation building, political term, nation building occurring. So in this regard, what is Jacob's eternal destiny? Well, we suspect that he's saved, that he's eternally saved. But the children of the promise, what is the promise? The promise of Abraham, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's, peace, prosperity, populace, 3 Ps.
But if that word "they" refers to the individual, so before they were born or had
Yeah.
done anything good or bad,
Mm-hmm.
then it seems to follow that Jacob was designated. It's talking about Jacob's particular designation as a child of the promise. Would you agree with that? Like that's talking about his particular designation.
Yeah.
Okay. So if that then before they were done, they were born or had done anything either good or bad,
Yep.
it would seem to follow that he was particularly designated as a child of the promise, irrespective or of things like works or willing.
Yeah. So that's totally fine with me.
Okay.
And even like Bates and Thornhill would talk about election to a vocation.
So in Romans 9 verse 6, would you agree that the phrases "children of the promise," "children of God," and "children of Abraham" are used synonymously?
I suppose I'm okay with that.
Okay. And would you agree that "children of God" in Galatians 3 and "children of Abraham" in Galatians 4 are primarily soteriological terms, which is to say, if someone is a child of God, right, then they are saved. Like that's they have the Abrahamic promise, and by virtue of that are saved.
I think for me, the issue is, how does one become a child of Abraham? How does one become an heir?
If one becomes a child of the promise, would you agree that it follows that if one becomes a child of the promise by God's unconditioned call, and a child of the promise just is a child of Abraham / child of God, then it follows necessarily that one becomes a child of God through the unconditional.
So I would reject your first premise.
Okay, particularly that the children of the promise are the children of
Are unconditionally called.
Okay, but didn't you agree that Jacob was designated a child of the promise by God's unconditioned call? Didn't you just agree with that?
The unconditional promise is with regard to the promise of Abraham, and would be distinct from thinking about the eschatological destiny of Jacob. So while we suspect that he's eternally saved, we believe that he was a child of the promise insofar as the promise to Abraham of peace, prosperity, and what's the other third P I had? Peace, populace. Yes, great people, great nation. Yeah.